Greetings, everyone. I'm Eric Hansen, and on behalf of everyone here at OTT.X, I am delighted to welcome you to episode 10 of OTT.X Video Cast, The Buzz, where we get an insider's take on what's shaking in the OTT streaming world, whilst being thrilled and entertained by accomplished leaders from our industry. Before we turn things over to this episode's crew of Buzzketeers, I want to make sure to mention that you can find and subscribe to all episodes of The Buzz via podcast on Spotify. So search for OTT.X and be sure to follow us so you'll be notified about future episodes as well. We're going to drop the Spotify link into the podcast in the chat, so you'll be able to get to it easily. With that, presiding over today's group of OTT Ruckus Raisers, we're excited to have Tom Gennari. He is CEO from global media and entertainment data science company BB Media. With Tom today, we have Raquel Braun, Chief Business Officer at Women's Sports Network, Jason Gish, President of Duplitech, Teresa Phillips, Co-founder and CEO at Spherex, and Eric Sorensen, streaming video tracker from Parks Associates. Welcome, everybody.
Hey, Eric.
Thank you. Did you call us Buzzketeers?
Buzzketeers. Yeah.
Oh, Buzzketeers. Okay.
Right. Buzzketeers. I don't know. Buzzketeers. You could be either one. How's everybody doing today?
Good. Great.
Not bad.
All right. Terrific. Y'all ready to do some rabble raising, ruckus rousing?
We're ready.
Let's hear it. All right. We'll talk to y'all in a little bit. Have a great time.
Well, thank you, Eric. And thank you once again for having us. You know how much I love everything OTT.X does. My name is Tom Gennari. I will be moderating this fun session today. Being just like ending award season and the Oscars just went by, I know that this will be available on demand, but the Oscars just happened. So we do have now these amazing nominees in this panel. And by the end of the session, we can decide who was the winner. Now it's not a competition, but so I would like you to do an intro on yourselves, like a 1-minute intro, who you are, what you're doing, and also when it comes to your companies, also do an intro on your own companies. So take it away, no particular order, so feel free to jump in whenever you want.
Happy to start.
Go, Jason.
Go, Jason.
My name is Jason Gish. I'm at Duplitech, president of Duplitech. We have offices down in, up in Burbank where I am, and then down in Torrance in the South Bay. And we offer services we do a lot of library content. So we repurpose that, we ingest a lot of stuff, digitize it, film scan, whatever the format is, we can ingest it. And then we turn that into usable content. So we, re-edit it. We put in commercial blacks for fast services. We can send it to OTT, and we're doing more and more transactional. But we provide a lot of fast content and VOD. And then we also have a division that focuses on new content, originals, mastering, and things like that, which is mostly what we do up here in Burbank. But we do full restoration services. So we have color grading sessions. We have directors come into the office, which is really cool and humbling. I started in September at Duplitech, and I came from a previous company where I was there for 20 years, and it was all QC, so there's nothing creative. So the creative side is really fun and interesting to me. So yeah, that's my intro, and I will interject a lot throughout the thing and interrupt everybody is my goal.
How far back do those titles go, the ones you restore?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but we've been doing a lot of stuff from the 80s, some stuff from the 70s. We get a lot of film. We get a lot of 35 millimeter. We even have a mag audio capture. I mean, we get lots of, we get 1-inch and 2-inch tape and all sorts of stuff.
That's amazing.
We recently did a couple of big projects. We did Alf from the 80s. We did the whole series. And that's up on a fast channel, and we did the whole Conan library not too long ago, and that's on a fast channel on Samsung. It's the Conan channel. But we do a lot of films. We do a ton of films and television series and things.
Well, when we monitor streaming services, and initially when we started finding movies, short movies from 1898 or
Oh,
1899. At the first, I was like, well, this must be wrong, right? And well, no, I mean, those are being restored and being made available on several streaming services, which I find it's absolutely amazing. So yeah, that must
yeah.
be fun.
Yeah, the archives are now usable, sort of, right? Before, nobody wanted to spend any money because there's no way to monetize that stuff. Nobody's going to put that back in the theater. Nobody's going to go see it. And on, broadcast TV, it's hard to get an audience. But now with streaming channels and specifically fast channels, you can make a whole channel about whatever, right? And just have that going and going. So there's more opportunity to leverage some of that, put some advertising in, get some eyeballs on that channel and make some money. But yeah, it's still hard to get those really old movies, so that aren't specific classics, tentpole title kind of things. It's hard to get some of that funded. So those
Yeah,
tend
I can
not to get a lot
understand.
of
Okay,
attention.
so we'll get back to that. So you're winning thus far, nominee number one. So who wants to be nominee number two?
I'm happy to jump in. I don't know how to follow Jason. He has like quite the insight today. So I'm Raquel Braun. I'm the Chief Business Officer of the Women's Sports Network. We're the first and only 24/7 network dedicated to women's sports, fast channel, so across all the tier 1 platforms. And we have league partnerships with all the major women's sports leagues and properties across the US. In my day-to-day, I oversee everything from our, channel operations and strategy, our league partnerships, our platform partnerships, and really we've been around for a year, so it's kind of just continuing to build the business and build the network and build those relationships as we continue to grow. And if anybody's been watching even a little bit of sports this year, even if you don't watch sports and you just pay attention to the news, women's sports has absolutely taken off, which is really exciting for us and for me personally, having been in the sports space for about 20 years. So it's been a lot of fun to build a channel exclusively around women's sports content.
It's great.
That is in fact very, very good. And we are seeing numbers when it comes to women's sports being made available worldwide in several business models. So I will be very happy to listen more about that during the conversations. So thank you, Raquel. Happy to have you as well in the OTT.X Buzz. So let's see, Eric, Teresa, who's up next?
Go ahead, Eric.
Okay. Well, I did call Tom and make sure that we were both wearing the same shirt today. It appears that that was I did get the uniform proper. Anyway, no, excited to be here. Thanks for having me. Quick background on me. I am part of Parks Associates. Parks Associates has been doing adoption rates and consumer home research for about 35 years. So that data comes into our consumer analytics team, and my role on the entertainment side is to analyze the trends in the data and tell our clients what that means in terms of adoption rates related to streaming services, connected devices, traditional and linear TV and legacy TV. We cover the connected home completely. So anything that's connected in the home, from your TV to your HVAC systems to your security cameras, we track all the adoption rates of those different
Not my
devices.
security cameras, I hope.
What's that?
Not my security cameras, I hope.
No. How many you have in your home? We're not
Okay.
monitoring your cameras. No, we just do
Okay, good to know.
we just do survey data about how many cameras you might have in your home.
Got it.
Anyway, so yeah, I've been in the space like Raquel, probably about 20 years. I spent 15 of those at ESPN, helping launch Watch ESPN app, Longhorn Network app, and SEC app. And then joined Parks Associates about 2.5 years ago. So I also manage our streaming tracker product, where we are tracking over 350 streaming services and providing you estimates and user data related to those different services. So that's my role. Happy to be here, Tom.
Oh, that's amazing, because we do need the data on some of these topics. So it would be great if you can share more of that during the conversation. Thank you, Eric. Teresa.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, good to be here. So I'm Teresa Phillips, co-founder and CEO of Spherex. And so We provide cultural intelligence and video compliance to everybody in the industry. So studios, direct distributors, platforms. And most recently, we're kind of known for local age ratings and our specialty around cultural, all the, cultural, political, religious laws and rules for content regulation globally. And so most recently, we've turned all that into an AI-based platform where we can detect and we interpret and classify. So we can do age ratings, advertising, compliance, something's kid-friendly, all kinds of things. So yeah, so we've been busy with that. As you guys know, AI is just taking off. I mean, the models and LLMs and everything, every week there's something new for us to train on. But it's funny because when we're talking about, what we do, this week I was talking to a studio executive and, on a sales call, and we always, I talk about the product, the platform, and what we're training on and the nuance, telling him about violence and how we understand the blood, the intensity, the victim state, all these things. And I was so proud of it. And then he says, yeah, but can you detect pink dildos? And I was like, oh my gosh. And then I said,
Can you? But can you?
well, I wanted to say we could do white ones, but we haven't trained on pink ones yet. So I don't know, but I didn't say that. But so I thought, I got off the call and told my colleague, growing up, I don't think I ever imagined having a job where I talk to studio executives about, that kind of thing. But that's what we do. We train for everything detection so that content can be properly adapted, curated, and distributed.
I'm gonna mention something. So I won't use your example. I'll use a different example. But yeah, AI is fascinating, and obviously it's moving really quickly. And I think your guys' tools could be a great use case for that as it becomes actual AI, right? It can start making decisions and sort of training itself. But back to that comment, from a philosophical standpoint, it's really interesting how humans learn and how we're trying to teach AI to learn. So, you said white versus pink. When a kid's growing up and sees a bicycle, you say that's a bicycle. You maybe give them 2 or 3 examples, and they have this image of a bicycle, and then they see other things with wheels, maybe a tricycle, and they say that's a bicycle. You're like, yeah, basically it's a little different. And they can start noticing those things. And a bicycle that's been sitting out in the rain and is rusted and the tires are gone, they still know that's a bicycle. AI doesn't. That's really hard for AI to understand. And things like, a fork, if you take the prongs off a fork, is that still a fork? So a human would say, well, I know that used to be a fork. Now it's just a piece of metal. It's not useful anymore. It doesn't meet the definition of a fork anymore, but it still was a fork. So those kinds of problems are really interesting to me with AI because it takes so much data for AI to understand a thing and be able to see it in lots of different types of representations. But for humans, it's much less so, right? They could do it with 2 or 3 examples and make a lot of assumptions about, what things are classified in that.
And
type of
Teresa,
thing.
is the AI that you apply for cultural and age ratings, is that like script-based AI or is it like video-based?
So
Do you
it's
apply that directly on the video?
Yeah, it's multimodal. So we don't do it with the scripts per se, right? We have the humans still read the scripts and determine what the objectionable content would be and the reach and travelability of the script would be. But our system is multimodal, so it does images, video, text, and audio. So we train each signal detects, and then it determines a confidence level. And so in a dark room, for instance, the computer vision may not know what's going on. And then we look at the dialogue and the sounds, and we know if anybody's getting hurt or having sex, or if there's other things going on. And then we put those signals together, and that's how we figure out to get a good idea of really what's happening in the scene.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really cool. So to kick off the conversation, just coming out of the Oscars, have you all watched it? Like the Oscars, like old school, like tuning in to watch the Oscars? Is that still happening?
Yep.
You did? Okay, that's good. That's good. Did you like who won?
It was running during a family gathering, so we were kind of half watching it.
Yeah, that's the way to watch it. I mean, it's too
Yeah.
intense if not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't watched Oppenheimer yet, so guilty about that, unfortunately. But what do you think about the winner, about the transmission, about the broadcast? There's always a lot about it, a lot of talk on how this is transmitted and broadcasted, about the audiences, if they're growing or not. So what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know what the tune-in was. Does anybody have that information? How many people actually watched the Oscars this year?
Yeah,
I
I
haven't
think
seen
I
numbers
have
yet.
it somewhere. Hang on a second. Let me
That
see.
it was the most viewed in the last 4 years, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was high. Trump
It was,
fucking
like show wise, it was very entertaining. But
It was
similar,
good.
I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, so I can't fully focus on anything before 9 o'clock p.m. So, and also have not seen, I don't think, any of the movies that were nominated except Barbie, which I watched on a plane.
Yeah.
I
I saw 19.5 million viewers is what I saw,
Okay.
which was up from 18.7 in 2023.
Well, it's funny because maybe people turned in to see if there would be another Slapgate. Remember a couple years ago,
Maybe.
it's Will
Yeah.
Smith.
That was fun.
And then next year they're going to turn in to see if Trump tweets from jail. So when there was that posting that Jimmy Kimmel did that was kind of off script. So it was entertaining, Raquel. I thought so too. It was good performance.
So I didn't watch, didn't tune in. I think it's one of those shows that I've personally lost interest in. But what I would say is that I think that the streaming services took advantage of the nominated shows by promoting Oppenheimer and all of the shows through the top carousel. So I think there's value in that from the streaming services, right? I mean, I think ABC has the rights to it for like another 5 years. The question that I always look at when these award shows come around is, are they going to stream it live on their platform, on their SVOD platforms, right? The VMPDs have it, but are they going to take these shows and put them live on their SVOD platform? And I don't think Disney did it again this year, but again, they have Hulu. So, it was certainly clear that that's where it lived. But I think that there's an interesting aspect of creating growth and opportunity around the promotion of the award shows versus the ability to drive the eyeballs to the award show, right? All the streaming services had the opportunity to gain something from this event.
In an event recently, I heard a presentation, I think it was by Peacock, and about like taking the entire Super Bowl to a streaming experience and how those numbers, at first it was like a huge fear around that. And then it turned out to be okay. This is also like where things are moving towards. And again, it's like, well, what's going to happen? Is this going to be for good or for worse, for better or worse? So yeah, there's a lot of fear about that. But I do see, as you said, when it comes to the streaming services promoting those contents that are being nominated, we did see a lot of spikes on all the nominated titles just prior to awards season, which is very healthy. It is a very healthy thing to see that this matters immensely.
Yeah, it's almost that's what I was thinking too, is that the content being available on all these streaming apps is unique this year. It's been obviously growing over the years, but I could watch, I watched almost every movie that was nominated at some point. And in previous years, I didn't even know half of them. I hadn't even heard of them. So, like Poor Things, I watched the night before the Oscars. So this stuff is it's available, and that hasn't always been true. And it's promoted, and we can see it on the streaming apps.
Yeah, it's definitely, I feel like if you don't live in LA, when you're driving down the 405 or the 10, they have the for your consideration billboards that they only do in places like LA. Otherwise, outside of kind of the growth of streaming, it wasn't as easy to find the promotion or see the promotion for things that are nominated, whether it's Oscars or the Emmys. So I think streaming definitely helps, I would think, on the movie side, kind of the content side, to continue growth and viewership there. Maybe not necessarily on the actual award show.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe the reason that the viewership was up so much was because people had seen the movies and were interested in the results because they liked certain movies.
And there's some good, I think, drama and leading into it about, I think drumming up the storylines about who didn't get nominated, who did, and everybody's super passionate about, the Barbie movie and then it not getting the nominations that I think everybody expected. I think every time you have a good storyline like that, whether it's sports, any sort of like live event, if you have good drama leading in, that drives people to tune in.
It's just like boxing, right? You got to have that smack talk leading to get people really interested.
I think it's also interesting that I think Netflix and Apple TV Plus had a ton of nominations, but didn't win a ton of awards, right? And so it makes you think about, during the writer's strike and during content budgets being cut, did that impact some of their big budget features not getting an award, being nominated, but not necessarily getting the award? I just thought that was an interesting factor. I think the year before, Netflix, I don't think they won for Best Picture, but they won, quite a few different awards in different categories. But I think they got a lot of nominations, but didn't really get a ton of awards, which I think is
only, as far as streaming content, I think it's only Poor Things that actually got an award.
Yeah.
Apple was the first direct to consumer to get the Best Picture at the Coda a couple years ago, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And The Killers of the Flower Moon was a bit surprising because they were nominated. And there was a lot of talk about promotion, theatrical promotion around that, just like Oppenheimer. So they definitely promoted it. That was a bit of a surprise.
So Teresa, you watch these like award-winning, Oscar-winning movies like Oppenheimer or also Barbie. Do you like enjoy them, or are you constantly thinking like, oh, this needs so much cultural adaptation for international distribution?
Yeah, that's a good question. The work that we do sometimes ruins the enjoyment of the movie because you're constantly analyzing it. And you guys probably all do the same thing, right? Looking at that and wondering, if they're going to use CGI or what they're going to do, if they're going to decide not to distribute or adapt it. But yeah, I mean, but I try to see the big ones in theaters with my teenage sons. So they always we go to see them. And so when you're in a theater and you're kind of immersive and eating that popcorn and stuff, it doesn't really feel like, I don't think much about international distribution at that point. But yeah, there's been a lot of adaptation in both Oppenheimer with the nudity, the gratuitous nudity, as we call it, in the US, and then also in Barbie as well, there was a lot of pushback internationally.
Yeah, I can understand that. So going back to streaming versus our traditional broadcasting and pay TV, recent news, I think this was just this year, someone projecting that streaming will overtake pay TV subscription revenue in the US this year. So that is changing things quite a bit. Eric, I know that you monitor these things very closely. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, that legacy TV as we know it is continuing to decline. There's no question about that. I think what we've noticed is that as more homes adopt broadband, and our data from Park Associates says that there's 118 million homes that now have broadband service, it opens up the opportunity to think about streaming services versus your traditional legacy cable TV. So we're continuing to see the decline. Our numbers show that 50% of consumers now have or still have legacy pay TV, while 89% of consumers subscribe to at least one streaming service, at least one. The average home has 5.5 streaming services that they subscribe to and pay for, and then 29% of consumers have 8 or more streaming services that they pay for, right? So we're continuing to see that growth, and the adoption of broadband and the known need for coax cables in your home for cable is opening up the door to streaming. Plus, again, old comments here, but the ability of no long-term contracts is why people are looking at streaming as a better option than their traditional cable. The interesting piece to all of this is that as the cable industry and the legacy TVs are trying to compete, trying to find ways to reach that streaming audience or move to digital, there's the bundling aspect that as the economy starts to struggle a little bit, people are looking at, hey, if you're going to give me 6 months of Apple TV for signing up with your broadband, I'm going to switch back. So we're starting to see that legacy TV and your Cox and Charters and AT&Ts and Comcast of the universe are recognizing that there's an opportunity to regain some subs by the bundle. So I think all of that is really interesting that, we saw a
Like
big dip.
going all the way
Yeah.
back around, or do you
Yeah.
think it's actually different?
No, I don't think we'll end up going all the way back around. I think the traditional providers or telco providers have recognized the streaming space. Look for example at the Charter Disney deal, right? So that was a deal where Charter, as you think about affiliate model and the rates that you're paying for each individual channels, that was a deal where Charter wasn't going to pay for ESPN and Disney Channel the rate that they were asking unless they provide their customers access to those streaming services, right? Because why would I pay you for that when you're also putting the same exact content here and you're gaining the additional revenue from that? So I think we're going to see continued conversations like that where the streaming services and your traditional cable providers are finding ways to partner so that, again, there's still an audience that only uses traditional TV and traditional cable. That audience is clearly shrinking, but it still exists and you still have to serve that audience.
Yeah, and I think that pay TV did go back to.
Raquel, is that you?
Hey, Raquel,
we have subscription services, but we still have connected cable for a couple of reasons. Though when the Spectrum Disney thing in my household, losing Disney Junior was a really big deal.
Yeah.
That age demo, but our frustration was we tested it out, kind of not having plugged in cable and just doing streaming and the constant Wi-Fi issues. And we both my husband and I work in sports. And so we kind of live and die over live sporting events. And if you don't have strong enough Wi-Fi to sustain watching live sports on a streaming service, having kind of cable was really good for us. But I think that's evolving and how you're able to kind of do live sports in the streaming space and kind of find accessibility, like ways to access it more easily. I think there's a lot more to come kind of in streaming with sports.
And to your point, Eric, about the broadband penetration, absolutely in the Midwest, it's where they're still required to use satellite, HughesNet, and others. And then to Raquel's point, that isn't the bandwidth isn't sufficient to be able to stream, and so they still hang on to DirecTV. But when DirecTV loses sports, so we're kind of at a point where if we can get broadband, universally across the U.S. and remote regions, which we should, then I think streaming's really going to take off.
Well, I think I just read about contracts needed.
Oh,
sorry, because the what Eric said, that pay TV and telecommunication companies tying the use of the households to contracts. But still, if pay TV stopped or telecommunication companies stopped doing contracts, like long-term contracts, you still get the feeling like people would not necessarily go back to pay TV because of that. So it's not just about that. But even so,
you're right.
When talking about the super bundling and a Verizon or a Charter doing deals, including SVODs, I mean, they have this, let's say, sneaky way of getting people back on board. There's long-term contracts, because it's well, as long as you continue to subscribe to this, you get that other thing that you also want, which I don't enjoy, because the industry that I love, media and entertainment, all the contents, they end up being just an added value to something else that is mobile or broadband access. And I don't like that feeling where everything that the industry does ends up being just hey, there's an extra thing that we're throwing in. It's called Disney Plus or Netflix or whatever, just because we want you to subscribe to our big broadband package. I really don't enjoy that, but it seems to be one of the possible paths moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you were to think about the savvy consumer who is looking at their wallet, right, and says, okay, I could do that 2-year deal with AT&T for my phone if it's going to give me 2 or 3 free services tied to that. I need a phone. I have to have a phone, so I might as well go with AT&T where I get these 3 additional free services, and I can cancel those subscriptions on my streaming, on my streaming deck, right? And then come back to those when my contract is up. I mean, I think it's really interesting that across the board, none of us probably have an idea of how many different services we subscribe to right now, right? If you were to add it up, like you probably have to go through your list and be like, oh yeah, I didn't know I had ESPN Plus, and so does my wife. Like that took me like 6 months to figure that out, right? That I have an ESPN Plus account, and so does my wife. So like, just thinking about that the transparency there is on the consumer right now versus the services. And I think you're sort of alluding to that when you're talking about the long-term contracts with the traditional telcos, right? That's on the consumer to recognize, are they getting a better deal from this bundle versus going directly to, an SVOD service that you pay for individually.
Jason, go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you before.
Oh no, I mean, I'm 4 stories in now. I'm not going to go back. Anecdotally, people do this thing. I'm going to term it leap VOD from leapfrog, but
I like that.
I just made it up. So they do this thing where they wait for a show to finish, and then they get that app, they binge it, and then they kill it, and then they go to the next one. And a lot of young people are doing that all the time. I've done it a bunch of times. So yes, people are trying to, the content owners and the streaming platforms are trying to get people to commit to longer. They say, we'll give you 6 months free, or we'll give you a year free if you join. And then they try to time it so that when that year expires, they have a bunch of new great content, or season 2 or season 3 come out, at the same time, so they catch those people again. But yeah, I think people are savvy. They don't mind switching around between the app services. I'm surprised to hear that traditional cable is still not overtaken by cord cutters.
Yeah.
Because I guess I'm in my LA bubble, so I don't.
I think the viewership, though, last year at least, there is, from a viewership standpoint, connected TV and streaming overtook cable and broadcast. I think so. Now it's just, I'm curious. I think those numbers were more about viewership and not necessarily about revenues. So I'm curious, kind of when then the revenue number also overtakes.
I think I was reading Q3 this year. The revenue is supposed to overtake pay TV for streaming.
Yeah, end of 2024.
Yeah.
I am rooting for like super bundles as the future for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, you want to call it pay TV, you want to call it something else, because any company that does like the last mile and has a possibility of like getting subscriptions from the households, any company can offer a super bundle one way or another. So, but I think it's just like a matter of like renaming things and getting used to a new that new normal. Now, sports used like 2 years ago. Sports maybe used it to be like the last place where like pay TV was still like trying to stick to as their like main type of content. But that is maybe no longer the case. And Raquel, we have you here as this. You're like the most important person to talk about that today. So what do you think on that?
About just kind of the sports bundling and kind of how we look at.
And it used to be like pay TV's sweetheart, and maybe that's just like no longer the case.
Yeah, I think sports are interesting because when you still look at kind of pay TV and the most viewed programs in the country of live events, the top 100, I think 97, 96 were sports events. And of that, the vast majority was the NFL. So there is still, and all of those, almost all of those are on kind of traditional broadcast television. Now, the ability to kind of also stream simultaneously so that there are streaming capabilities there exists. But I think, you hear it, all the trades, there's the constant conversation about how like sports is what's keeping kind of cable and traditional television like alive. And then you're seeing it was really fascinating to me. And especially I grew up in Miami, so I'm a big Miami Dolphins fan, and all of the commentary around the Kansas City Miami Dolphins playoff game being on Peacock only. And unless if you lived in the Dolphins or the Kansas City DMAs, you're able to get it on local broadcast, but otherwise you had to watch it on Peacock. And there was a lot of complaining about it, but a lot of people still watched it. I mean, the numbers were crazy. And so I think there's slowly becoming an acceptance to kind of games being maybe only available on streaming. You have Thursday Night Football, you have MLS on Apple. So you're starting to see streaming move it, or sports moving into streaming. I think the challenge, and what I spend a lot of time looking at when I look at women's sports, is, when you have a very established sport, you have an NFL, you have an NBA, Major League Baseball. I mean, it's okay, I think, for the NFL to take a game a week and put it exclusively on streaming. Everybody knows the NFL. It's been around for a very long time and has a very healthy audience. I think if you're a newer sport, an emerging sport, and you're still trying to grow audience, that the thinking between, do I go to streaming? Maybe. Are there more rights fees if you go exclusively streaming? But then if you're chasing fees and not necessarily audience growth, are you limiting a league's growth capabilities? So I think, we saw that a lot years ago in the soccer space, where certain leagues went exclusive to one kind of suite of premium cable, and a lot of the brand awareness kind of went down, and so you had leagues kind of rebuilding. And so I think in the sports space in particular, I think trying to kind of run that analysis and figure out, how do we continue to grow kind of niche, newer, emerging sports across probably a variety of platforms versus just going one way versus the other.
And what is your strategy on the Women's Sports Network when it comes to raising awareness in different leagues? Because there's a lot of content and competitions that need a space and to get more distribution. So what is the best way for them to achieve that?
Yeah, so I think we look at women's sports as having so much white space. I think it's been amazing to see some of these major legacy media companies coming in and supporting the live events and certain live events around certain women's sports leagues, but there's still a ton of content sitting on shelves, or it's very hard to find a lot of stories that aren't being told. So we look at women's sports in a few different ways. So we don't just have live events, we don't just have rears of older games or documentaries and storytelling. We have a really good content mix that allows us to tell different types of stories across all of the major women's sports leagues. But for example, with the PWHL, which is the brand new women's hockey league, we came in and they were able to secure regional sports deals in the markets where they have teams in the US. And then we were able to come in and round that out as the national media rights partner. And so we have live hockey on the network. And I think that, as I've learned more about the fast space, because I came from traditional media, I spent a long time at Fox Sports. And so I've seen kind of how sports properties are built and grown, especially niche sports and emerging sports. Seeing how we're able to bring in all this live content to fast, which is pretty unique in the fast space. You don't typically see a bunch of live sporting events, which comes with its own, learnings and challenges on how you manage that as well. But we see this massive opportunity to have live destination, appointment viewing on fast, but then also wrapping that with, game re-airs that, if you missed, especially there are certain demos that aren't really going to plan their lives around the live event. Younger viewers, they'll follow stats or, info on social media on their phone because they're living their life, and then they'll want to go watch a game afterwards. And so we're a destination where you can do that. You can watch the live game, but you can also watch highlight shows and studio programming and content that just tells the stories of female athletes, which you really can't find that anywhere else when it comes to women's sports.
It's interesting that that you guys are getting viewership from replaying events, because obviously any live event, but especially live sports, really loses value after it's aired. And I think that's why we're seeing so much consolidation with ESPN and Warner and Fox all combining so they can keep that feed going with exciting new live content to keep their subscribers. Otherwise, you go and you sign in for an event and then what's next? Or if you miss it, you might go watch the highlights, like you said. But I don't, I guess some people are watching the full game, but I don't know anybody that's ever done that. Usually they just, if it's done, they'll go back and say, oh, I want to see that touchdown or whatever, but they don't watch the whole thing.
It's interesting. I would look also to our data experts here, but what we've seen in the data we've seen is, like I said, demo wise, when you look at younger viewers, kind of that younger demo, they're more likely to, like I said, not plan their lives around, a 2 to 3 to 4 hour game window, go do something. And if they hear it was a great game, they see some highlights on their phone, they'll want to go back and watch it. And it's actually really hard in sports generally, regardless of the sport, to go back and watch a game. Most, the way league rights and things are structured, oftentimes you don't necessarily stack, old games, but we've seen some really solid performance on archive games and then kind of what we call near live rear. So we'll rear something relatively close to when the original aired. We'll kind of cut it down, clean it up a bit, so it's not as kind of lengthy of an experience. But I think for that younger demo, that is a much easier to consume version of a live event when they're trying to do other things too. So we've been, very pleasantly surprised and how well that performs for us. And it allows, I think also there's so much sports content out there. There's so many options on things that you can watch. It allows you to kind of pick what you want to spend time watching live and then kind of where you can go catch up and watch more later.
One of the streaming services we monitor, in fact, is the NHL and the library they've got available. And the thing is, costs for making titles available and leaving them on demand or restoring older content that also has a cost on its own, as long as costs continue to be more accessible, it's amazing the amount of content that is being made available on sports in particular, which is like incredibly dynamic, just for its own nature. And when monitoring at first, we thought it was some kind of error when looking at all the contents available on the NHL. And they were like literally in the hundreds of thousands of clips and old matches in there. And it's close to impossible to imagine how much content there is just like laying around, being made available. And maybe it's like, well, is it on demand? Can we put this on a faster channel? I don't think it's of value to putting like very old hockey matches. And I have heard about faster streaming services actually asking for more live sports, as you were saying, Raquel. So I think that is in fact very good to win that space over. And then also, but if you get the chance to include the channel on a pay TV service, would you also do that? Or this is just for fast streaming services? You already have the channel on pay TV, right?
So it's not on a traditional MVPD. So we're on, your Roku's, your Freebies, your Zumo, Fubo, Sling, and your connected TVs. But, I think it's something we've talked about, what if you could then put it on, a traditional MVPD cable provider. I don't know. I'll never say never. It works, I think, from a business model standpoint right now. That isn't something, that we're hyper focused on, because I think we look at, what we're doing in FAST as being super successful, and then how we can complement that with a platform like YouTube. And so we take, content that's working in the long form sense on the channel, and then we look at how do we complement that with YouTube. And we've quickly in the last few months become the #1 women's sports destination on YouTube. And so for us, that's more the content mix and complement that we look for, which is kind of what's long form on the network, and then what can we cut down and make kind of bite size on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, and metadata is key to that, right? And that's part of the problem with the catalog content and even FAST is that there's just not that metadata. And then specifically when you're looking at sports, for example, and you don't remember that you want to watch a particular, game or a particular month, it's about the highlights, it's about the players. And so if we can figure out ways to make sure that metadata gets surfaced, and then discovery improves across programming and across networks, then people, I think, would enjoy that, be able to enjoy that more, right?
Yeah, do you help in particular like sports events to get to produce metadata for those sports events, Teresa?
I didn't catch that. I'm sorry.
So when producing metadata for those even live or older sports events, do you produce metadata for them as well?
No, we don't today, but we have talked about it, with the whole VR and stuff, because the idea is, with like privacy and things moving, kind of shifting away from cookies, and in worlds where there's not a lot of descriptive metadata for back programming. We've got to somehow figure out how the asset itself can give its own signal, right? Because there's so much content, you can't do that with a human. So that's why we and others are looking at video indexing as a way, and training it for specific use cases as a way for, and using AI to do so, the content itself to come alive and to give its own signal and to highlight certain things that can be used for personalization and discovery across genres, across platforms. So that sports isn't our use case. Ours is still, kind of objectionable content, global distribution, but the same technology that we have today can be applied to different areas.
I understand.
I think one of the things that
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in terms of thinking about sports content, when you think about the big four, which are, NBA, NFL, baseball, and collegiate sports or college football primarily. But when you think about that, those deals are long-term deals that have been locked up for like 10 years with your traditional pay TV providers, right? The VMPDs of the world and the networks. So I think what we're seeing now is that we're at that opportunity where those deals are coming up, those deals are expiring, and the big tech giants are looking at this as this is our opportunity to get sports content. It's exactly really what happened with Thursday Night Football in the NFL, or when you think about Raquel, when you mentioned the AFC playoff game between the Chiefs and the Dolphins. I mean, that was a huge win for Peacock, huge win in terms of the numbers of subscriptions that it drew. But we're moving. I mean, it's a moving target of sports moving more online to streaming services.
So Eric, what do you think about the JV between ESPN, Fox, and Warner Bros. Discovery?
Yeah, I mean, my take on it is that it's a skinny bundle. It's an opportunity for these three services to get to drive additional awareness to streaming for them. Fox doesn't have a streaming app right now, right? Fox Sports doesn't have a streaming app necessarily. So when you think about the rights that are moving online, I don't believe there was a lot of talk and a lot of conversation that this can ruin traditional TV or this is going to be the death of traditional. I don't believe that at all, because the rights are locked up. This isn't like they're going to take it off of NBC and ABC and CBS and just put it on the streaming app. It's another place for those who don't have traditional TV, that are only cord cutters and streamers, to watch the content. Right now, what we haven't talked about yet either is the fragmentation of sports rights being everywhere. Right, it is ridiculous trying to find a baseball game. Right, what network is it on? What channel is it on? What RSN is on? What streaming services is it on? Right, so I do think there's that piece that will play into this joint venture that will make some of finding that content a little bit easier, but it's not going to be cheap, right? This is not going to be a cheap service when you think about the amount of money that is spent on those big four sports media rights that these companies have. So it's not going to kill TV. It's going to be a better experience for consumers online who are diehard sports fans. Might help make the content find a little bit easier, but again, it's not going to be cheap. But it's not going to end traditional TV as we know it. What I think, and I just started saying this to my boss the other day, but I think once the NFL contract is up with the traditional cable providers and the networks, then we might see a bigger decline in traditional pay TV, right? And that's like 2033, so like 8 to 10 years from now.
Well, it'll be really interesting to see, the NBA, that there's so much talk now. The NBA just launched their next rights cycle. And so that's where a lot of people are wondering, is this when, a very material package of rights goes to an Apple, an Amazon, a Netflix, will this be when they decide to go into like a major live sports deal? So it'll be really interesting to see kind of how the NBA addresses, because they have so many games, and so how they'll decide to slice and dice their rights. Kind of the two partners that they have now.
I mean, I think just the last point on in terms of sports consumers, our data shows that like 40%, I think it's 40% of US traditional pay TV subscribers still watch linear TV because of sports content. Right, they still subscribe to traditional pay TV because that's the only place that they feel like they can watch sports content.
So related to the having trouble finding the kind of sports you want to watch, and also to the metadata, archives of sports, I think is an interesting place that there's a lot of monetization possible. If you have the metadata, there's a lot of stuff you can do with VOD and put that up and drive subscriptions. But I think in especially a fast model, there's a ton of stuff you could do with all sorts of sports. You could take you know, in hockey, you could take all the best goalies and do a thematic 1 hour show of goalies, and then it can be the, you know, it could be the NHL streaming channel, and then it could be like the best scorers, and then all the best fights, right? And they can be like these 30-minute episodes or something. That there's tons of that kind of stuff that people would watch if you're just flipping through the fast channels, or it just pops up when you turn your TV on, like it does with the Samsung, and that channel comes up, people are going to watch it. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And then my shameless plug is we do that. But I don't see it happening very much with sports. I see it happening more and more with old episodic television, but not sports. And I think it's a huge opportunity missed.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I mean,
Definitely.
so many of those archive rights sit with the leagues. So I think that it's just going back to leagues and
Right.
priorities, and how much kind of manpower, budgets, all those things they would take to focus on archival to create that new revenue stream versus kind of looking forward and how they're trying to reinvent and continue to grow, you know, viewers, people showing up in games and all of that.
And especially leading up to events, like leading up to the Super Bowl, they could
Yeah.
have a bunch of Super Bowl highlights, you know,
Yeah.
and people would definitely tune into that just to
Well,
get
the NFL Network did
NFL
that.
does
They
have a
ran
fast
like
channel.
24 hours of Super Bowls
Yeah.
leading up to
Okay,
the Super
there you
Bowl,
go.
right?
Yeah, because the NFL has, you know, they've had the NFL Network for a really long time, and then they launched a fast channel a couple of years ago.
Any data on that, Eric?
Person.
Not in terms of the fast channel usage on the NFL Network. I mean, the NFL Network channel, right? And we're not a ratings. By the way, we're not a ratings service like a Nielsen or a ComScore. So in terms of ratings, that's not really what we do. But you know, in terms of subscriber estimates, we use our methodology to figure that out. And then in terms of users, right, we'll be able to tell you how many users are on a fast channel, maybe.
Yeah,
Monthly active users, right?
Okay, guys, before we run out of time, we've covered like main topics that have been happening in the last 2 weeks. But before we wrap up, I want to do like a fast group dynamic in your areas of expertise each. Can you throw just one line of like a hot news and you expect to be big during 2024?
I'll jump in.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see consolidation and the big three streaming services become more powerful.
I agree. Raquel?
I think specific to my world, I think, you know, women's sports, you know, it's not just a moment. I think it's officially here and it has its place amongst, you know, other sports that people are consuming and watching. And so I think we'll continue to see, you know, women's sports outperform certain other, you know, male counterpart events. We've seen that some already this season. And so I think we'll continue to see some really exciting growth in women's sports. I think, you know, it's just on us to now sustain it.
And what I think is what's even more important is that it will be across different business models as well. And not just fast, but also like SVOD and also on pay TV. So definitely a lot of space for growth there. Definitely. Teresa?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more local language programming coming into the US. I think we'll see a lot. I hope there'll be a breakthrough in content discovery with AI, assisted AI, because the long tail of content is being lost. Nobody can find it. And I think we're going to see a lot of redistribution, which we're starting to see. You know, there was you know, the direct to consumer had their own services, and now we're seeing Disney and others, you know, relicense their content out to other platforms. And then I think there's, you know, Netflix is looking over it fast and saying, what can we learn from them? And so we might see some custom channels or custom ways that users can get more involved in curation to get to that long tail and personalize the experience a bit better. So, and I do hope we get a lot more international content.
That's true. And Jason, you can also help make that happen, especially when restoring older content.
Yes. We're here. My turn?
Yeah.
So yeah, I was going to say basically what Teresa said, but I think that AI is going to grow leaps and bounds in the sort of language service providing services. So globalization of content, and that is both, dubbing and subtitles is really getting close now. Dubbing has a little ways to go. But I think we're going to see that really change this year really fast. And that's going to hurt the existing traditional LSPs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, and one other thing to add to that, Jason, is that the studios and are kind of pushing back on AI, right? We know that. And if they do, I mean, technology is going to happen, innovation is going to happen. And if they do, they're missing the opportunity of shaping the future and how artists get credit and attribution for things, because the big techs are going to come in and do what they're going to do. And so
It's going to happen anyway.
it's going to happen anyway. So as media players, we really want to lean forward in figuring out how we can embrace change and technology in a way that continues to honor the story and respect the artists.
Yeah, there's going to have to be more legislation around that kind of stuff, obviously.
Okay, guys, so we're close to the hour now. So we need to wrap it up. And as my dear nominees, we do need to define a winner. So like drum rolls. And well, no, we are all winners, guys. I mean, that's totally fine. But if I were to pick Raquel, I really look up to what the Women's Sports Network is doing. So like really congratulations on all of that. I think it's outstanding work what you're doing. Really.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Agreed.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, everyone, and OTT.X once again for having us for this OTT.X Buzz. Eric, if you're there, you can take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. That was terrific. I really enjoyed it. And thanks for not following suit with the Oscars and having a male streaker sort of cross the path. We did pretty well. There was some dildo speak early in the session.
Yeah.
I would say that Teresa gets an award for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I think so.
Bringing up the most unexpected topic.
Yeah.
I wonder about pickles. Do they get confused? The
They
AI
must.
machines? All right, that's enough.
Training data. It's all about the training data, Eric.
Well,
Topic for the next one.
thanks a lot, Tom, Raquel, Jason, Teresa, and Eric for taking us on that insightful and invigorating deep dive down the rabbit hole. Over the top, and with only a couple of exceptions, without careening off the rails, we'll be back again for the next episode of The Buzz on April 10th. Register to attend this and future episodes from our website, OTTX.org. Find our podcasts on Spotify. I hope you'll join us and invite your friends as well to get in on the buzz. We are proud to offer these sessions free to the OTTN industry on behalf of our OTTX membership. If you're not yet a member, I want to invite you to head out to the OTTX website and look into becoming one. We have membership tiers for a broad range of organizations and professionals. We'll drop the link into the chat right now. That's OTTX.org. So until next time, everyone, thank you so much for being here and happy streaming.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.